Well, hey everyone, welcome to today's webinar. I'm Jack Sindelbach from Solcyber, and I'm welcomed and joined with Paul Ducklin, a cyber expert. Today we are talking about 4 decades of ransomware, learning from the past and what it looks like moving into the future. We're going to go through some really interesting demos and kind of see what it looks like from the perspective of the bad guys. But with that being said, I'm going to hand it over to Paul, and he's going to get things started.
Thank you very much, Jack. Well, I'm really honored and excited to be here. Now, it's customary when you're starting a webinar, particularly, it's not like a live audience where you can actually see them. So you tell a joke, you don't know whether it's landed or whether anyone's found it's funny. So, but at least it's customary to start off by introducing yourself. So as a matter of courtesy, I will just tell you who I am. I'm an independent cybersecurity expert. I have worked in the industry in the past for very many years, starting from the 1980s. I'm not going to tell you why I'm uniquely qualified and why I think I'm an expert. I think the cybersecurity industry is full of enough self-styled experts. It's for you to decide whether I'm an expert or not. I just put this slide up so you know who I am, and so my contact details are there as a matter of courtesy. So let us crack immediately onwards, and let's look at the 5 things that I kind of want to get into today. And when I typed in the words for this slide, obviously I wanted to start with history because we're in the 4th decade of ransomware. So those who cannot remember the past are condemned to repeat it, as the saying goes, and I don't want any of you to be that person. So history is important. Obviously, ransomware is about scrambling stuff and then forcing you to pay for decryption keys, so cryptography is important. But ransomware, particularly among malware, isn't really all about tools and techniques. There's a lot of psychology and criminology involved. The crooks with ransomware, they're really going after you. They're really going after your mind as well as your files and your computer. And of course, we're going to end up with some tips. And once I typed in those words, I thought, my golly, that sounds very glum indeed. So I do hope that as far as we can, given that this is a very serious and in some senses very dangerous topic, I do want us to have a little bit of fun. So if you have been a victim of a ransomware attack before, I do really feel for you. If I get rather excited during the presentation, that's because I share your pain, because this is one particular branch of cybercriminality where this is like digital mugging rather than just coming home to find that someone's broken into your house and stolen something. So let's start off with a definition. That's what mathematicians and scientists are supposed to do. And I think we all know roughly what ransomware is, and we know why it gets its name. The ware refers back to software. So it's a special kind of program, but it's an evil one. And if you've ever wondered about the word malware, it's just shorthand and ellipsis for malicious software. And there's all sorts of malware. There are key loggers, there are remote access Trojans, there are crypto miners, there are RAM scrapers. All the names say roughly what that malware does. Ransomware, the name kind of says it all. The idea is it's malevolent software. It locks you out of your computer, it could be your laptop or your phone, or it locks you out of individual files or all of your files, and then it doesn't try and hide. The difference between ransomware and most other items of malware is once it's triggered, the crooks want you to know. It's all about saying a bad thing has happened to you. You can see it's happened to you. You can't get into your files. Send us money or they're gone for good. So certainly ransomware has become in people's minds this idea of there's a malicious file, there's a dangerous program, and surely magic cybersecurity tools can deal with that. And to some extent they can, except that, as you probably know, there's a kind of second meaning that's come along in the last 3 to 5 years in the ransomware scene that means that these days ransomware isn't just, when we use that word, we're not just talking about a threat file, a bad program that you can look out for, that you can watch for an email, that you can look for in your web filter, that you can look for in your endpoint software and so on. Ransomware has come to have a whole human angle, that it refers not just to the software that the crooks might use to do the file scrambling, but it refers to the entire attack methodology, as you might call it, in total. So it's bringing in a whole human angle, because these days what most ransomware crooks aim to do is they aim to steal your data first. They don't necessarily have to get all of it. They just get the really sexy stuff, what experts call the trophy data. And the owners, by getting stuff like maybe they'll get employee data that includes driving license scans and social security numbers and IRS details and bank account stuff. In other words, what they're doing is they're grabbing data and they're saying, not only is your business derailed because we've scrambled all your files and you can't keep your business going, we know so much about you and about your customers that we're doubling the pressure on you to pay up. So it's gone from being a technological thing that deals with technology by scrambling your files, and something that basically messes with your mind and your psychology as well. And we have had cases, ransomware attacks, where the crooks have stolen data that includes employee details, and they've gone into the employee data that they've stolen, and they've got contact details for the individual employees. And as well as negotiating, say, with the CFO for money, they're also sending direct messages, emails, even phone calls to individual employees saying, hey, you know what happened. You storm into your CFO's office and you let them know how important it is to you that you pay, because that they pay up. Because when we leak this data, it will include your driving license. It will include your social security number. They're really making this hurtfully personal. And that's why, of course, if you make a tag cloud out of all the different types of malware that are out there, and there are loads of different names in there, and each one of those is a problem in its own right. The one, if you took the malware names out of media articles or headlines, ransomware would certainly dominate. And it's that whole psychological angle and the whole fact that A, it stopped your business operating, and B, it's messing with your mind, that makes it such a huge problem. And you don't have to look far to find out what kind of people we're dealing with. And here's an example. Now, when I did the rehearsal, I had loads of these examples. And afterwards, Jack said, "Dude, I think you should just pick one of those," because I was getting so enraged by the very many examples I was able to find. And I think young Jack was worried that I might get into some kind of apoplectic frenzy and have an aneurysm by just my sheer rage at the kind of stuff going on. But this is a classic example, and this is from end of last year, beginning of this year. You don't have to look far to find headlines like this. St. Anthony Hospital in Chicago, attacked by crooks, hospital out of action. $900,000, if you don't mind. Recently, we saw the NHS Southeast London in the UK, a whole load of hospitals had to cancel operations, even emergency operations for cancer patients, not because they got ransomware, but because the third-party company they used for blood tests and pathology couldn't do the test because they got hit by ransomware. Well, what a nice bunch of people. And that kind of raises the question, if this feels new and fresh and dangerous, and these attacks are happening right now, 2024, surely this must be a new kind of thing, and we'll get on top of it soon. And that brings us to the historical question, how did it all start? And you might be surprised to find, and this is actually around the time that I was a freshly minted computer scientist and was getting started as a scientist at a research establishment that wasn't in the UK, it was an English-speaking country, and viruses hit the scene, and that's how I got into cybersecurity. And this is one of the early things that I analyzed. It all started like this. People generally weren't on the internet in 1989. Some people were, but it wasn't quite the commercial success that it was to become within a few short years. There was no World Wide Web yet, and people generally exchanged files simply by swapping floppy disks with one another. And so the guy who I'll call him the perpetrator. He's dead now. He died in 2006. He was from the United States of America. And there's an interesting angle to that, a sort of psychology of how the criminals try and excuse themselves that carries on to this day, which we'll look at. And he decided he wanted to try and I'd call him the perpetrator. He was extradited from the US to the UK to stand trial for this. The law enforcement in the Netherlands, the UK, and the US cooperated even way back then to identify this guy and get him and get him identified, get him extradited. But he was found unfit to stand trial eventually. I think everyone knew he did it, but he was never actually convicted. And he decided he was going to do what we today call a supply chain attack. Instead of putting this thing on a bulletin board and maybe some people will download it, and maybe over time it will it'll sort of drift into, it'll drift into people's vision. But by then everyone will know about it. Why don't I try and hit up everyone at the same time? And you can see from this envelope, that's a square envelope, which is a strange shape. Firstly, you can see from the stamp, that's the late Queen Elizabeth II, very many years ago, 24p, that's about 5 times more now, postage in the UK. And licked and stuck on stamps. They didn't have self-adhesive stamps in the UK in 1989. And my understanding is that the law enforcement people investigated this, figured that whoever did this, whoever he paid or to use the stamps, they did tens of thousands of these, must have licked and stuck on a stamp for every single one, because although they could have rented a franking machine, it would have left a much more traceable trail. So this whole idea of remaining anonymous was a thing that was kind of a deal for crooks even back then. And when you open those, and by the way, the reason very few of the people in the US who got hit is he deliberately went after mail out lists that were outside the US. And I think he was worried that he wanted to keep the cops off his back. And what you received, so it looked legitimate. You actually got a diskette. That's a floppy diskette, just to give you an idea of the size. 5¼ inches across. That was the size of diskettes then. That's a $quarter coin, courtesy of the US Mint. That gives you an idea of that size of that central. 360 kilobytes. That's all they stored. But they were reasonably valuable. It was quite nice to receive a disk in the mail, and it gave it a credibility that it would not have had if it had just been, hey, download this thing. It's a great way of learning about your risk of contracting HIV and developing AIDS, which was a huge deal in the 1980s because there was no cure. Nobody knew how to treat it. Something people were very scared about. And in that envelope was a tiny little piece of paper with very tiny writing on it, and I've blown it up here. And you can see, and crooks do this to this day, they come up with all sorts of excuses that they hope will kind of let them off the hook in the future. These days, the crooks are saying, oh no, we're not ransomware criminals, we're just doing retroactive reverse penetration testing, where instead of paying up front, and then you pay whether we succeed or fail, we do the penetration test for free, and you only pay if you fail. And that's how they justify their ransom, if you can believe it. But I'm not kidding. And this guy, you can see, I put in red there, PC Cyborg Corporation, that was a company he created in Panama as a kind of, so he could have a bank account to collect the money. He said, you have to pay for this, you can see there. And he said, in case you breach this license agreement, that we reserve the right to use program mechanisms to ensure termination of your use of the programs. Now, that would never, I don't think that would stand up in any court. The idea was basically saying, even if you delete the program because you don't like it after you've tried it out, if you don't pay me for trying it out, I will screw you over in the future. And because he put it in writing, maybe he thought he could get away with it. And you see that he's saying, you may not do this in the United States of America. I'm sure the reason for that was he figured, I'll try and make my money elsewhere. It probably cost him $20,000, maybe $30,000 to send out all those diskettes. And you kind of he's thinking if he sends out 20,000 of them and 2% of the people fall for it, then he's going to make about $120,000 if they pay $300 each. So he kind of figured that's how I'll come out on top, $100,000. And I bet you he wasn't planning to declare that to the Inland Revenue Service. So here's what it looked like. And it's just interesting how, firstly, how old-fashioned it looks because it's DOS, but also how similar it is to things that happen in ransomware to this day. So let me see if I can, new share, I need to share another window now. Here's one I prepared earlier. So here we are, we're in MS-DOS. And believe it or not, we're running MS-DOS 3.3. And so that the date works, whether you're in Europe or in North America, I set it to the 12th of December. And now remember, those discs were mailed out on the 7th of December, 1989. So many people would have been receiving them by then. They went all around the world. I don't know of anyone who received one in the US, but as we'll see, when it came time for the money demand, he didn't say, hey, you're not allowed to pay if you're in the United States. He was happy to take your money. He was just trying to cover his backside legally by saying you can't, this program is not for use in the US. And I've installed his software. It won't run off the floppy. You have to run his installer, and that's the trick. And you'll see it's installed a program there called aids.exe, which is it's AIDS information. It's like a little expert system, very 1980s. Now, it's not a very good program, and it's not worth $300, particularly since it goes about how it's trying to help people. It's trying to educate the great unwashed, and it urges you to share it with other people. It's definitely not the kind of thing that anyone is going to pay $3 for. They might donate $3 to a charity, but nobody's going to pay $300 to $400 for this. But he's put that in the small print. And what you don't realize, because it doesn't look like anything's bad there, because he's done what crooks do these days, and I'm using an old utility. Some of you may remember this, PC Tools, and basically this is a program that lets you dig into the hard disk. Now, we have much more sophisticated tools these days, but the crooks are still using the same kind of tricks. And you can see this is very, very old school software. But not only do we have the DOS directory that you saw there, my test data directory, we have these weird directories with, those aren't spaces, they're invisible characters that you can't normally see. And he's created a directory called error in the. In other words, what he's hoping, I think, is that if somebody knows what they're doing, and if they go in with tools and they see this, they'll go, oh, something bad, my disk must be corrupt. Maybe I'll run the check disk program and that will be enough. But in fact, these hidden directories, there's actually a secret program that he's hidden in a directory that has this invisible file name. And that file, it's actually a program. I'll go in, that's with a hex editor. And you'll see if you can see my mouse moving, it's actually called REM. And then that's not a space, it's an invisible character. So he can reference this program in a batch file by putting REM and what looks like a space. And when you look at it, you think rem in a batch file means remark. It's a comment. So you ignore it. And in fact, what this malevolent programmer has done, if I can remember how to escape from this, is he has created an auto-exec, a program that will run every time, that he actually says, that looks like a remark, but it's not. It actually runs this hidden secret program every time you reboot. And after 90 reboots, it kills your hard disk. So what do you get for your money if you pay? Well, you get the program that looks like this. Look, very 1980s. It pops up and says, it gives you a whole lot of background stuff. It's about for health. Welcome to this program. It will ask you a whole lot of questions, and it use the program in private. So it looks like a sort of public service program, although he wants nearly $400 for it. And it tells you a whole lot of stuff, and then it invites you to put in your country, and you can tell the age here if we. Just like we seem to have gone full circle. We're back in this now when when it says what is your country on a website, and it makes you do it from a scroll down, and you can't just type it in. When you get to the end of the list where you can see its age, Zaire is no longer called Zaire, of course, it's DR Congo. But you'll notice there's a country missing there. That you've got UAE, you've got United Kingdom, you should have United States of America, but he's deliberately left that out. Because remember, he wants to make it clear, dear FBI, I had nothing against you guys. And it asks you a load of questions, and look at it. This kind of program, this was very weird behavior by a program, very sort of sluggish and not very professional, even in 1989. And it asks you a whole lot of questions, and it asks you about your sexual history and all of that stuff. I'm not going to go through the program. It's quite boring, in fact. So let's exit. And let's say we've looked at that and we thought, well, that doesn't look much good. It's trying to look like an old school IBM logo. So what if I just go, well, I don't want that. I'm not paying for it. And you delete the program and it's gone, and you think, I don't need to worry about it anymore. But of course, he's left behind that secret program that's counting the number of times you reboot. And because I have a virtual machine here, my computer's about 1,000 times faster than DOS computers were. I'm just going to put a reboot command into this auto-exec file. And then I'm going to reboot the computer. Believe it or not, 90 reboots will take fewer than 9 seconds in this virtual machine. It would take hours in the old days. That's why malware research was quite hard, because there were no virtual machines. You couldn't speed things up. Computers were just hundreds or thousands of times slower. But after a certain number of reboots, so it's just rebooting at rapid, you can't see it. Oh no, something bad has happened. Depends on how he primed the disk. For most people, apparently this was 90 reboots, which would take about 3 months, or if your computer crashed a lot, might take a month or a week even. And afterward, remember, I've removed the program. Oh, now comes showdown time. And of course, you haven't got a renewal disc because you didn't pay them the money. And it says, oh dear, red warning, just like today's ransomware. The lease has expired. And it even says, get your printer ready. It tells you how to pay. It tells you where to pay. And you have to send a banker's draft for $189 or $378 to Panama. And then this isn't going to finish because I don't have a printer attached. And your computer's stuck. It just keeps going round in a loop. It keeps telling you, no, pay the money, get your printer ready, and it actually prints you out an invoice. So as a user, what you do, of course, is you would, and I'll just try and make this quick, is you would probably then stick in a clean boot floppy, which I can simulate here. I've got a clean DOS disk. And then you would reset the computer, hard reset it, turn off the power, turn it back on, and you would say, I want to boot from floppy disk. This would take minutes in DOS days. It takes less than a second now. And you boot from the A drive and you go, well, I'll go to the C drive. I wonder what this nasty man has done to my hard disk. And you list your files and all you see, 0 bytes free. And you see that there's a file there that tells you what to do next. And it fits on the screen and it says, if you're reading this message, bad luck, you have to pay. And even if you're an expert or you can find someone who has, and you use your magic disk recovery and disk exploration tool, you'll notice that those weird directories are still there. You'll notice in this weird directory, he's created, you can see at the bottom there, he's deliberately filled up the disk. So you can get your disk space back. There's a hidden file you can delete. But the problem is that all your files have been scrambulated. And have a look at that. That file is supposed to be command.com. We can see that if we go into it, you'll see that it looks like, from the strings inside, it looks like the good old DOS command.com. And the next file below it, that's a file called comp.com. It compares two files. Now notice that COMM has become _RCC, _RCX. And if we go into my, if I go back into those test files. Now that test data that I set up, those files, I called them JJJJ, KKKK, LLLL, MMMM, etc. You can see that actually the encryption system is really simple. All he's done is the letter J in a file name is replaced with D, but the content of the file is left intact. And so that shortcut in programming, the fact you use the same encryption every time, well, what a relief. He screwed up the cryptography. It was the same encryption key for everybody. It scrambled the directory names and the file names, but not the files. Free tools soon came out and you could recover without paying. The other thing is that the authorities worked out who he was, because not many individuals go out and buy 20,000 floppy diskettes in America. The UK had contacted their chum, the police had contacted their chums in law enforcement in the US and said, this funny thing has happened. This guy's bought mailing lists of a computer magazine and some medical experts, and he sent out all these disks. People in the UK are getting their disks scrambled. And the FBI kept their eye on him, and eventually they figured out who it was, and they arrested him, and they charged him, and they extradited him. But he never stood trial because it seems he either went mad or he did a great job of pretending that he was not fit for trial. So he never actually was found guilty, but he was sent back to the US, and the FBI, how can I put this, kept their eye on him from then on, because they had some suspicion that this was his first go, and if it worked out, he was going to do something much bigger and worse next. So your disk was scrambled. If you were a regular user, you'd be really panicked. You might be inclined to pay the money, but A, you could recover, and free tools came out that would help you do that. And B, you had to go to the bank and you had to get a banker's draft and you had to send it to Panama, and then it had to clear, and then you had to persuade the bank, no, it's not a scam. And today that's hard enough with know your customer rules. Even in the 1980s, that was difficult. And so it was so hard to pay that people sought other ways around instead of paying. Oh, by the way, then you'd have to wait for the disk to arrive that you could put in your computer. People didn't have that time. They actually looked to the community for help. And because he had screwed up the cryptography, the good news is you could, in this case, recover by yourself. So let us go back to the story so far. And let us look at what the effect of this. Now, a lot of experts, myself included, I was just getting into cybersecurity at this time. I actually received one of those discs that had reached someone all the way in South Africa. They were probably a subscriber to this UK computing magazine because it was English language computer mag. They received the disc completely intact after all that distance, and I got hold of it. They said, "Oh, we've heard this is a scam. You might want to have a look at this disc for analytical purposes." And so a lot of us thought somebody has finally cracked how to make money out of computer malware. Ransomware, that's the way. You scramble the files, you taunt the person, you demand the money, and hopefully some people will pay. The good news is that ransomware did not take off in the way that people thought they would, thought that it might. And I was one of the people who thought, yeah, we've had all these viruses so far that delete your files, they corrupt your disks, they crash your computer, they do all kinds of maybe politically oriented or culturally oriented or sociological problem oriented things that from these mostly kids who seemed to be doing it at the time. Nobody's figured out how to screw money out of the victims yet. This might work out. And it didn't work out. And unfortunately, there were at least some, perhaps even cybersecurity vendors, who figured, you see, look how great our tools are. We've got all these tools that save you from malware. Look, ransomware hasn't taken off. And it didn't take off for another 2 decades. Unfortunately, it wasn't because we did something clever. My opinion is it was just too hard in those days for the crooks to collect their money. It seems that nobody, not one person, even tried to send the $378 to Panama. Too hard, too difficult. And word got around, I guess, among the virus writing community that one guy tried it, and within a month or two, they'd caught him and arrested him and extradited him, and he was on trial for more than a year before he was eventually sent back to the US and kept under observation for some considerable time. So it wasn't a technological success that caused, if you like, ransomware to fail. But we did get 22 years off until a very unsophisticated group, with hindsight, actually came up with, some of you will remember this, they were called police locker or device locker ransomware. And the main gang doing this was a gang called Reviton. And what they would do is they didn't try and scramble files or do cryptography. They kept their programs very simple. And that's a screenshot from Brian Krebs's website. And the reason there's no window around it and it doesn't look very sophisticated is that with just the whole screen. It basically would install a program on your phone or on your laptop. It didn't need to worry about how to find your directories and find your files. All it did was it ran early enough that before you could start making a call, before you could get into Task Manager, before you could do anything, it would just pop up over the top of everything else and say, we're the cops, we've caught you watching illegal porn, that was one of the things, or we found pirated software on your computer, you need to pay. And I think for some people, they did make loads of money out of this. Not perhaps as much as they'd hoped, because people would look at this and go, when you read through the English, it just sounds nuts. But I suspect that some people got into the habit of paying up this money. Here it's $100 they want, but often they just wanted 75. That was a very $50 or $75. 75 was a very common amount that you would see at the time, particularly on mobile phones. I think some people just paid up because they figured, you know what, if I take it into the Geek Squad, or I take it into, to PC World in the UK, or take it for somebody to have a look at it, they're going to charge me $150. They'll probably put it right. I've heard you can fix this yourself. But if I just send the crook $75, maybe I'll be able to use my phone this afternoon. I've got a meeting coming up and it's really important. Because particularly on your phone, before you could even do anything, this thing would blast over the top of the screen and make using your phone completely useless. Same on your laptop. Whatever you tried to do, this thing just kept reappearing. And it was hidden like the AIDS information Trojan was. It wasn't terribly easy to find. You needed to know where to look. But the real deal is, by then, we had this thing called Green Dot Money Pack. If you're in the US, I'm sure you've heard of it. It does still exist, but it had to it disappeared for a while, and it came back with Know Your Customer rules. No one was really worried about Know Your Customer in those days. And because of this Green Dot Money Pack, you go and buy this prepaid card, you send the crooks the details of the card, they can go and spend it. So these guys, they didn't have to buy diskettes to reach 20,000 people. They could send emails and reach 1 million people. And the other thing is they had a way of collecting the money that was pretty hard to trace, because you weren't actually sending them the card. They didn't need to give you a physical address. You just sent them the magic code, the codes off the card, and they would then go and use it online. So they kind of solved the problem. They didn't solve the problem how to scramble files in a way that you couldn't reverse yourself, but they did solve the problem of how to get the money out because the technology had just caught up. Now, the good news is that didn't last long. It took about a year, and Reviton, the whole gang, and that whole police locker thing was neutralized, and we didn't hear much more of it. Firstly, the main gang, they were busted in Spain. Just a reminder, we saw that in history. They've got this guy in the US, has a company in Panama. He's got a mailing list from the UK, and he's sending his stuff to every English-speaking country and Western Europe, but everywhere, every English-speaking country except the United States of America. So these guys, I don't know where the Reviton people were originally from. I think some of them were to be honest, from Russia, but a bunch of them were busted in Spain. It didn't scramble your files, it just simply locked your computer. And because it just relied on software that you could dig off the computer if you knew what you're doing, news got out, like with the AIDS information Trojan, here's a magic recovery disk. Instructions circulated on your phone, on your laptop. You could use a thing called safe mode, where you'd start up in a special way and you could get in before the software, you'd go and remove it and you'd be safe and you didn't have to pay. But it kind of showed where we were going, because 1 year later, that showed that you could make loads of money and you wouldn't get caught based on the money. You get caught for other reasons. I think these guys were doing other crimes on the side. And those of you who are around in IT in 2013 will remember CryptoLocker, the first widespread ransomware that demanded money, and they would take Green Dot Money Pack. They would take a thing that called Ucash that was quite popular in the UK. It was the same idea. It was a card you could buy, and there was no real know your customer stuff, pseudo anonymous payments. But for the first time, they would accept Bitcoin, and Bitcoin was available and easy to use enough that people were going for it. But the big thing that they changed is the big thing that they did, and they copied that original 1989 ransomware, once it triggered, ransomware does not hide at all, unlike any other malware you'll typically see, which tries to keep dormant, it tries to keep under the radar, and it wants to keep logging your files for as long as it can, snooping on RAM and stealing your credit card data and watching your banking transactions and living in your email account like the business email compromise guys. Most malware really aims to go unnoticed. Ransomware, those B words want you to know what happened. They want you to know why you can't recover. They want you to know how to pay. And what the CryptoLocker guys started is they started this countdown system that remains to this day. They would start with 72 hours, and they would count down, and they would say, you better pay, because we'll delete the key. And so they kind of changed the rules a little bit by scrambling your files. It means they didn't need good internet bandwidth to steal all your stuff. Even if they couldn't upload your files, they didn't need to delete them. And even worse, by leaving the files on your computer, you could see they were there. They were tantalizingly close. In fact, these guys, if you look there, they have a link you can click. This is on your desktop. And you click there, and it shows you a list of all the files on the computer that they've encrypted. And you can see those files. You can copy those files. You can back those files up. You can try and open them with Word or Excel or PowerPoint or whatever your database application is. Shredded cabbage. So the crooks are kind of playing with your mind. They haven't just taken the data and deleted and said, oh, well, we'll sell it back. You say, look, you can see it's there, but it's locked and you can't get it. So what really changed here is that the criminals, had a way to get the money out, but most importantly, they learned how to use cryptography. So they did take a technological solution, which worked really well. And the first thing we mentioned is Bitcoin was now mainstream enough that they had a pseudo-anonymous way of taking money from people without going through any bureaucracy. No need to get a banker's draft and send it to some weirdly named anonymous company in Panama. You could just do it all online. The Tor network, you could get the Tor browser, and that let you contact the crooks and chat to them in a way which is very hard to trace, because Tor not only shields the client from the server, and it shields the server from the client. So neither end can work out who's who. So the victim feels, well, I'm doing a deal with the devil, but at least the crooks don't know where I live. They don't know who I am. I'm just negotiating at a distance. And the crooks know that even if you're law enforcement and you've got infected and you're connecting to them, they can talk to you, but they can't find out where your server is, which makes it very hard to take it down. And of course, they used RSA, they used public key cryptography, so that there was no way that it was very, very difficult for you to recover yourself like you could with the AIDS information Trojan or the Reviton Trojan or the Reviton Trojan. With the AIDS information Trojan, if you remember, everyone's files, the names all got encrypted the same. So once one guy had worked out that J became D and P became whatever it was just a random mix-up. Once he knew that list, once one person had gone through the hard yards, everybody could recover. And what the crooks did is they used a system that called public key cryptography, which is how web security does. And rather, I was planning on giving you a little demo with code, but I decided that would be too complex. So what I'm going to, I hope you can see this. Let me know if you can't, Jack, over the top of that background RSA plus AES demo. Traditional encryption is like this padlock that I'm holding up in front of you now. It's a padlock that has a key that you can turn to open, and you turn the same key, locks the padlock. And so if I want to give you this padlock for you to lock something up, if I want to lock this padlock on your computer, I need to provide you with the padlock and the key. And then afterwards, somehow, I need to confiscate the key, and I need to keep it anonymously on the other side of the world and say, would you like to buy the key to the padlock I just used? And that's quite hard. It can be done. There is ransomware that works like this. It generates a random key to go with a random lock, and it locks up your files, and then it takes the key and uploads it over the internet and deletes it from your computer. That kind of works, but it means that if you happen to be offline, or if their site isn't working at the time they do the scrambling, they don't get the key, and neither you nor they can recover, and they get a bad reputation that don't pay those crooks. They're crooks, and you won't get your data back. But public key cryptography works like a more conventional type of padlock. It works like this kind of spring padlock, like you might use to lock up your bicycle or your shed or whatever. And as you know, here, I could send you this padlock open, and there's the key. I keep the key far away on the other side of the internet. So I can bury this lock inside my malware. I can use the same lock for everybody if I really want to, but just generate one for each user. And then when I lock the files on your computer and I say, you see, they're locked, you can't unlock them. You never had the key to unlock them. And what I offer to sell you is this. And essentially in public key cryptography, that the lock that you can lock amounts to what you call the public key, because anybody can do that. But as long as I can send you the lock and I keep the private key back. And that is what the crooks are offering to sell you. And unless they make a mistake, like they use the wrong kind of lock, or they use a key that's too simple, so the lock's easy to pick, if they do it properly, basically, you don't really have much hope of recovering on your own, because as long as they're the only ones with the private key to your magic padlock that they chose for your particular malware and your particular encryption, you're sunk. And that was something that the CryptoLocker guys did. And to the best of my knowledge, they didn't make any blunders in their algorithm, and the algorithm itself, the software was never cracked. Some people did get their keys much later because they did get busted. The cops did a raid. I think it was in Finland or somewhere. They did a raid on this secret data center for some other reason, and they were confiscating all the servers. And while they were there, apparently they realized, hey, this is the CryptoLocker server. There are all these, and it had all these private keys for thousands of people who hadn't paid yet. So sometimes the cops get lucky, but only after the event. So what happened thereafter? We've got a few minutes before we go to Q&A, so I just want to finish up quickly now. What the crooks did is that obviously once they'd solved the technological problem, this public key cryptography, you don't have to be an expert to do the programming right. Windows has a thing called Crypto Next Gen built in. So do Apple computers. On Linux, most people use a thing called OpenSSL. You've probably heard of it. There are professional quality cryptographic libraries that anybody can use, and you can download the software that does this magic locking and unlocking in this public-private way. You don't need to write that code yourself. It's built into operating system, you kind of get it for free. So the tools weren't where the crooks' skills were. The skills were that they suddenly turned into the kind of IT staff that you kind of wish perhaps some of your other software vendors would have. Firstly, if you contacted them for support, like you contact them on Tor and said, "Oh, I'm stuck. I don't know what to do. I don't know how Bitcoin," somebody would jump online and help you. They were as helpful as, after they'd screwed you over, they would be as helpful as they'd be nasty to you, but they would, if you didn't know how to buy Bitcoins, they'd teach you, they'd show you, they'd hold your hand if you were prepared to let them into your computer, which you probably wouldn't be. So they got the human side of it right. The other thing that the CryptoLocker guys did, and this is kind of quite important, is they actually got the whole infrastructure, the whole network thing where they had a database of private keys and they had all the public keys that they buried in the malware. If you paid up, you probably would get one of these and it probably would work and it probably would unlock your files. And sadly, from the first days, these jolly ransomware crooks kind of got a reputation that they did not deserve, in my opinion, for honor among thieves, if you don't mind. And people learn that, well, it's $300. There's my wedding photos. There's my tax returns for the last 7 years. There's a PhD thesis I need to hand in 3 weeks' time. I'm just going to pay the money. Like, I've got a backup, but I don't know what's in there. I've got to get the disk out. It's going to be really hard. I haven't practiced my back. I'll just pay the money. And you would almost certainly get your data back. And unfortunately, that meant that the crooks got a reputation that kind of they used for ages afterwards. And they also adopted, instead of doing it like, the name of the guy was Joseph V. Pott, the suspect in the AIDS information Trojan. He did most of that himself. He bought in a mailing list. He probably hired someone to lick and stick the stamps and buy the envelopes in Britain and all of that sort of stuff. But basically, he kind of did it all himself. And his notes suggested that he was like a loner. He wanted to take all the money for himself. Today's ransomware crooks don't do that. They run affiliate networks. They basically recruit third parties, tens, hundreds, possibly even thousands of other people. They write the malware, they churn out the malware, they do the money collection and the laundering the bitcoins, etc. But they have thousands, sometimes thousands of people, small, medium, and large, working for them. And it doesn't matter whether you're a small business or a large business. Some of these affiliates may go after $1,000 at a time. Some may think, oh, I'll go after the middle lying fruit, that where it's $10,000 a time. I'll have to hit 10,000 people and then I'll be super rich. And you get another brand of crooks who go, no, we're going to work on one victim at a time for a month, and then we're not going to ask them for $300 like St. Anthony Hospital, Chicago. We're going to ask them for $900,000 if you don't mind. Or like apparently the guys who hit the London hospitals, they said, we want to start the bidding because you're the National Health Service. You must be they apparently started the bidding, if you don't mind, at 50 million US dollars. Well, good luck getting that much money out of the British public service. It's never going to happen. So what this meant is that the core crooks, suddenly had thousands of people doing their business, and that led to what we now call human-led attacks. So it's not about software tools that they send out and the malware does the job. The crooks actually unfold the attack step by step by step. And it's as though malware, that word malware, malicious software, it's now as much about the attackers and the style of the attack and the psychology of the attack as it is about the code, the actual tools inside the attack. With the result, of course, that just relying on software tools to fight on good software to fight the bad software simply isn't enough, because you have to take the whole attack into account. And the other thing, I'll skip this bit because I'm running out of time, but I can simply tell you this. And anyway, going in, unfortunately, I'd have to show you, if I show you the dark websites, I was in two minds about it, because you actually get to see the names of victims. And of course, there's no evidence that they really got hit. So I don't want to make anyone look bad. But if you go with Tor, if you go on the dark web, and if the lists of the sites are readily available, you can find them if you search a little bit. And if you're a victim of one of these crooks, they will make sure you know the magic.onion, the magic Tor address that you have to type in to negotiate and find out how bad it is for you. Basically, they actually have these dark websites that are all about PR. And I say their cyber criminals have now got their PR right. Of course, I mean, they've got it deeply wrong. It's not ethical, it's not moral, absolutely bastardly, but from a criminal angle, they've got it dead right, because they've got sites that anybody can visit, including the victims, which expose and embarrass the victims publicly, because they actually eventually publish data there. They will advertise data that they've got for sale, saying, oh, don't worry, like if you don't pay us the ransom to get your files decrypted, because maybe you've got a backup so you think you don't need it, we'll make the money by selling it to someone else, and we'll only sell it to one person. So we won't publish it for the whole world. We won't tell the regulator, but somebody will get all those social security numbers. Of course, the other thing that those breach sites do, because they show that, hey, we've got 100 victims on the hook at the moment, it's kind of quite attractive for recruiting the next wave of humans. And really, the point of those sites is absolutely all about driving home that this is true for much malware, but it's very, very true for ransomware. This isn't about your files. It isn't about your software. It isn't about your network. The crooks want you to know this is about you. This is about the scans of your driving license. This is about your employment contract. This is about your leave record, your medical history, all of that stuff. So they're actually, that human angle is that, as I said at the beginning, they're messing with your files, they're messing with your computer, but they're very definitely determined to mess with your mind as well. So very quickly, let me present with 5 tips, and then I can see we have a couple of questions that I will get into. So just give me one more minute to go through these tips. Now, these tips, they work for all types of malware and for IT security and safety, not just for malware in general, but they have a very specific importance when it comes to ransomware for all the psychological reasons that I mentioned so far. Firstly, please keep on top of your backups, because you don't just lose data because of a ransomware attack. That's a very common way these days, and it's a very disastrous way because it typically cuts across your whole network. But you could have a flood or a fire, or you could just get locked out of your office because, the roads got dug up and the cops, so sorry, no, there's a gas leak. You're not allowed into your office. You're going to need backups for lots of different potential reasons, and the simple rule is the only backup you will ever regret is the one you did not make. And by the way, having a live backup in a cloud service that's permanently updated live all the time from your computer, it's very convenient. That's great for version control. But it's not really a backup if it's online at the time the crooks penetrate your network, because one of the things they do when they're recruiting their affiliates, they don't want programmers. They want IT people who've lost their jobs, who are struggling for money. They want IT staff who know backup software. They go in and find your backups, and if they can, they delete them first. So always have something off-site and offline. The second thing that the crooks love is people who haven't patched, because then it becomes easy to get in, and they can get in without being noticed. They can get in under the radar, and they're not after an instant attack. They're prepared to take several days. The third point that I had mentioned before is this isn't about tools. Some software vendors, well, security vendors, they come out every year. I got a great new tool. Like, remember that one we sold you last year that was so great you would never need another tool again? Well, here's the tool to replace the tool that replaced the tool that replaced. And so things just get more and more complicated, which is the lead into point 4, which is, particularly with ransomware, this is all about humans. Your best defense is a human-led one, because the attackers are human-led. They're not relying on spamming out malware that might run on 1% of computers. They're aiming at using humans to try 100 different ways to get into 1% of their potential victims, and when they're in, then they will cut themselves across your entire network. And the last point is, well, you can try and do it yourself. You may be a big organization that has the funds and the money, and you've got 14 spare people to run shifts in your security operations center. But you don't need to do this by yourself. Your business is probably doing anything but cybersecurity. That's why you're attending this webinar. That's why you're interested in cybersecurity service. So buying software, that's hard enough on its own. So the idea is that a service like Solcyber, it's not just outsourcing your IT. The idea is that you are getting a human-led security operations center that is designed for humans by humans. And with that, Jack, I think we've got some time for some questions, and I can see a couple of them here.
So we do. I will ask them and then I'll let you go ahead and answer them.
Right.
Awesome. So the first one, it says, has the values of individual ransomware attacks gone up or gone down over the last 4 decades?
I think now, my own opinion, this is not necessarily what Solcyber thinks, but it's what I think. The answer to that, like so much in cybersecurity, is the very annoying answer, yes and no. And now, obviously, when you look at the news and you hear that, if you remember the Colonial Pipeline attack, where people were literally pumping gasoline into plastic bags because they were scared. Oh, it's not funny, but it's kind of, Jack, I see your smile. But I shouldn't laugh. Like, we were sitting here in the UK going, they can't be serious. They're putting volatile fuel in plastic bags that it dissolved. But, that's how bad things were. And Colonial Pipeline apparently paid over $4 million. And then they found the decryptor wasn't very good anyway. So clearly, $4 million that Colonial Pipeline actually admitted to pay, more than $4 million, after they said they weren't going to pay. They obviously figured, well, this has got so bad, we'll just pay and hope. And then it didn't work. And they figured, well, we wasted $4 million, but we had to try something. Clearly, $4 million is a lot higher than $378 that the guy set Joseph Pop set back in 1989 with the AIDS information Trojan. So some ransomware demands have gone up enormously, but the reason is really that the crooks are going after entire networks because that's the human way of doing it. The CryptoLocker crew, their expertise was running this back end that eventually the cops seized, how they got all the keys. They had this huge database. They weren't going for 10 different victims at a time. They had probably millions of these private keys in their database. And when you contacted them, they'd match you up with the right one. They'd check that your Bitcoin payment had gone through and they'd send it to you with a program that actually worked. Amazingly, they wanted $300. Some of the gangs are a bit higher, some are a bit lower. But when ransomware came back 22 years later after the AIDS information Trojan, inflation notwithstanding, the price point was still around about $300. And they were aiming to get millions of people on the hook, and thereby they thought we'd make $300 million. So the thing with the CryptoLocker, if 100 people inside your company got hit at the same time because they'd got a massive spam campaign and all those 100 people had got hit, you'd have to pay $300 for each and every one of them if you wanted to recover their computers. Whereas now it's a kind of these days the crooks just they say, no, we're not doing you. It's like an all or nothing. It's an all you can eat buffet, but it's expensive. The other thing to remember, and I did have a slide, but I took it out to save time. This was research that came out last year from Trend Micro, who's a cybersecurity software vendor. They looked at 3 ransomware gangs and they looked at companies up to 100 computers, 100 to 2,000 and bigger than 2,000. And they found that the same gangs who were making money going for $1 million ransoms were just as active through different affiliates at the lower end of town where the ransoms might be anywhere from $500 to $5,000. So the problem is that we've got all the problems of the past, in my opinion. We've got the low value ransoms, which if it's your computer, your most important computer, you're still going to have to pay the money. And we've got the high value ransoms and everything in between. But there is no doubt that the crooks have the top, if you call them, the nastiest ransomware crooks have definitely increased their ransoms. And the figures I heard for that National Health Service Southeast London hospital outage was $50 million starting price. Now, I presume they'd come down. I don't know how those negotiations go. So the problem is that the amount that you might have to pay for each individual computer has probably gone up a little bit. Mm-hmm. The point is that you're generally having to pay for 1,000 or 2,000 or 100 or 200 computers at the same time. So in a way, the value per computer may be the same, but the cost, if you like, is probably much higher, because if you have 10 computers in your network completely derailed, even if one of them's a CFO, you'll probably survive. If every single computer, every single virtual machine, every single server smashes against the wall at the same time, then you're going to have a much bigger problem. So it's not, unfortunately, it's not really about the value and the amount you have to pay. It's about the degree of disruption, whether you pay or not. And just as an aside, it's very important to remember in ransomware that this thing of, oh, well, we've got $1 million because we've got cyber insurance, we can come up with $1 million, we'll pay the $1 million, you get the decryptor. That's when your expense starts. And you may find, some people I think find that $1 million or that $100,000 or the 50,000 that they paid to get the decryption keys, that's just the beginning of their expense, and it may be 2 or 3 times as much again, because you still have to go and actually distribute the decryptor, hope that it works, deal with the cases where it doesn't. You probably need to bring in an incident response team who attend in person, all kinds of stuff. So the problem is not so much that the value for the big attacks has increased in the total amount that you have to pay, no discounts. It's like there's no stock splits
Yeah.
when it comes to buying ransomware recovery. But the potential cost of getting hit has very definitely gone up, because you could be in trouble with the regulator, or you could derail your entire business. That was a
Yeah.
long answer, but I think the problem is that with cybercrime is you tend not to get rid of the past. You tend to deal with all the badness and all the stuff you had to remember 5 years ago, and all the new stuff as well. And that is the problem. And that's why companies like Solcyber exist and can really, really help you, because they stay on top of that stuff so you don't have to.
And then to add on to that, I think there's also the reputational risk as well, the potential of losing customers in the future and customers that you have right now. But good answer. And one more.
I think you're absolutely right, Jack. I didn't mention that because that's hard to quantify, because sometimes you see company stock price will go down, but then it will recover. But I think people are starting to become a little bit more cynical. They're going, I've got 2 companies. One's been hit by ransomware twice, and they lost social security numbers, and they had to offer people 2 years of credit control and blah, 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 blah. And these guys actually haven't been breached, and they maybe talk a more honest game. Maybe I'll go with them. So that definitely makes, and of course, there's the fact that even as the victim of cybercrime these days, because of regulatory stuff, like with your public company in the US, with the SEC, if you're doing anything in Europe, anything to do with GDPR, you could be liable. So you could be a victim and everyone will feel sorry for you, but you could get fined yourself, and those fines could be huge. So that's another thing that didn't exist before.
And then one more question, kind of along the same lines of what we've been talking about, is paying those ransomware payments, is it worth it? Or would banning the payment of these ransomwares, would it help in the long run? What's your opinion on that?
Yes, what to say here? Will banning ransomware payments help? Wouldn't that break the cycle? That is Jack, is a very, very difficult question to answer. And governments around the world are wrestling with this. And the UK and the US are 2 examples where there are people on both sides of the equation. Now, I think the US is doing has gone about it in an interesting and I want to avoid using political tags, because they can be quite political, almost religious. Obviously the US has all these amendments written into the Constitution that give people rights that maybe in other countries that kind of don't quite exist. So I think the US feels more strongly about this. And my understanding is the federal government's approach is that we should do everything we can to discourage people from paying. There are certain cybercriminal gangs who are so big and so bad and so keenly going after the federal government itself that we are going to sanction them. So it is illegal to pay them. So sometimes you can't pay. But in general, particularly if you're a small business, say you're a bakery, we're not going to tell you if the alternative is that your business would actually collapse and everyone would lose their jobs. We're not going to tell you that you're not allowed to take the risk of paying 25 grand to the crooks and maybe saving your business. So that's kind of where we stand. My opinion is that banning the payments would not help, because some people would suffer unnecessarily. People who don't want to pay, who don't really have the money, but kind of figure, you know what, my business is ruined if I don't do it. Kind of like, well, it's like there isn't a law that says if your child gets kidnapped, you have to just go, well, that's it. The kidnappers are going to kill them. you're discouraged from paying because it often doesn't work out very well. But there isn't a law that's generally that says you can't do it. So I think that the future is that you will probably have the freedom in most cases. There will be special cases with the real dastardly crooks, the real big guys, the named threat gangs where they may be sanctioned, and that's certainly happening in the US. And I think the US and Europe is coming at this from another angle, saying, okay, you can pay them, but whether you pay them or not, you have to report a ransomware attack as a breach. In other words, you have to come clean. You can't brush it under the carpet, and you could be liable for some fines and penalties yourself. In other words, what they're saying is, rather than banning payments and then the crooks will stop doing ransomware, if you remember, if I can go back in the slides a couple, if you go back, that's cloud, that tag cloud, I skipped over it to save time. That's the same tag cloud, but I just removed the word ransomware. And if you take ransomware out of it, there's still a lot of stuff that we have to worry about. And I think that people can get blinkered by going, well, if we solve the ransomware problem, we will solve the malware problem because that's where 80% of the pain goes. Believe me, A, it's not. There's lots of other pain. And B, cybercrime abhors the vacuum. So I understand the motivation for banning payments. I think all that will happen is A, it will drive payments underground, or B, it will lead to people paying through third parties in other countries, which probably will be a legal loophole, particularly for global companies to go, oh, we didn't pay in the US where it's illegal, but we paid in Vanuatu where it is. And oh, we happen to get the decryptor that just happens to work in the US, so it will be foolish for us not to use it there. And I think, thirdly, it does mean that people who no one wants to get hit by ransomware, no one invites it. I think for small businesses, it could be disastrous because something that might, with great pain in their heart, might actually save their business would be unavailable to them unless they could find this cheaty way of doing it. So I don't know the answer to that question, and I don't know where the various regulators of the world will go. But I think the solution is that what most countries want, and certainly see this from the attitude of the federal government in the US, is they actually don't want to ban the payments. They actually want to help people stop getting infected at all in the first place with ransomware or any of the other things you see in that dark cloud in front. And that, in my opinion, will be a much better outcome.
Awesome. The best protection is prevention. Well, hey, Paul, thank you
Yes.
so much. You did awesome today. For everybody who joined, I appreciate you spending the last hour. I hope it was informational. I hope you took a lot away from it. It was certainly a lot of fun for us. But that's all the time we have for today. I appreciate everybody joining. Duck, once again, awesome job. And we'll catch you in the next one.
Thank you, Jack. And thanks for having me.
Bye, guys.
Until next time, stay secure.